Welcome back to Q Dads, guys, and yes, it's me, Ben. That's right, taking over Steve's weekly duty to bring you our episode 5 breakdown of Severance. And we're going to be talking in this episode about the whole reintegration process and how Mark has now witnessed Gemma within the severed floor. The work that Irving and Burt are going to be doing on the outside and how that could kind of carry out, as well as who potentially Fields could be. And of course, we will be discussing that all-important performance review of Milchick. And I must admit, there's been some great moments within this episode, and some really funny moments too.
It smells like horse shit.
Yeah, Swedish horse shit.
But of course, before we do any of that, don't forget to hit that subscribe button because it really does help us to grow, and we want to hit that next milestone of 3,000 subs. And we're not too far away, and really me and Steve would quite like to do that before the end of Severance so we can have our own waffle party. Well, actually, remembering what the waffle party was. Probably not together, but still, we want to hit 3k. So this episode starts with a doctor making his way through the severed floor as he approaches a couple of members of O&D to then take some equipment from them and then start wheeling it back towards the same room that Irving's been painting, which is supposedly the export room. Now, first of all, we've got to ask ourselves the question, who is this doctor? And number two, why the doctor in the first place? The reason behind that is why show the importance of a scene with this person? Potentially medical work that is being carried out. Now, is he potentially adjusting someone's implant? Potentially someone like Gemma? Or maybe he was actually removing the implant from Irving because he has been permanently taken from the floor, considering he was dismissed. Or are we about to see a new severed member? Maybe Rick N will finally join the floor? Or are we able to see another Egan? To be fair, it did feel a lot more like a death than a creation scene, so it's possible that it's chip removal from Irving. We then head over to Mark, who was told the story of his innie falling off a rope. Now, one of the things that really annoys me about this last episode was that as much as it was great to see that retreat in number 4, we kind of skipped a lot of time around it, and the fact that everyone is now back off this retreat and we have no idea how the innies or the outies even worked on that journey. Was it the fact that they suddenly woke up over there and instantly told, oh, you fell off a rope? Or was it a case that they had to journey back to some kind of looming facility before they could make that switch back to outies? Now, I'm not 100% sure, and I think one of the things for me that it just drives me mad and really bugs me at the moment. But you know what, I'm not going to fixate on it too much because we're in episode 5 now, and it was a great one at that. It was also revealed that Helena is essentially forced to continue with the Severance programme, and by the board and her own dad encouraging that move too. And this of course leads on to Helly re-entering the Severance floor and instantly being led by Miss Huang to Milchick, Mark and Dylan. And this is when Milchick explains the whole purpose of the retreat to them, that Helena had indeed taken over her innie through a traditional ceremony of... Now, Milchick explains that is a Swedish ceremony and that the Egans have actually been doing for some time now, with Kia Egan doing it himself.
It smells like horse shit.
Which I think is an interesting line and potentially will be revisited later in the season. Now, we move on to some of the better parts of this episode, where Irving is being completely erased from the severed floor, meaning that they now have a desk of 3, which obviously ticked off Dylan and was brilliant to see. But also, they've actually erased Irving from a group photo as well. And I think that was very harsh to do. And it's almost like they've just taken him out of reality. An absolute brutal move from Lumen. But of course, after that, we do get to see the funeral, which was a funeral rather than a retirement as we predicted. But we finally get to see that melon head of Irving. And of course, we actually get a great line here from Dylan, which I love.
For the least fun guy in the world, he was really fun. He put the dick in contradiction.
And this for me just again reiterates that level of comedy within the whole series. Just the quick one-liners, the quick remarks that just make you chuckle, but there's no kind of obvious direction towards it. You're not forced to feel that bit of comedy. And for me, that's why Severance is a great show with brilliant writing. Now, of course, this funeral actually does lead Dylan to finding directions behind a poster leading to the doorway, which was probably planted there for Irving by O&D. Now, this follows on obviously from a conversation with Felicia in episode 3. Now, obviously, we saw that that door was at the start of the episode. So again, we need to ask, why does Irving's outie know about this in the first place? And I think the ominous phone calls that he's making kind of give away the fact that he's trying to infiltrate Lumen. Now, I question here if Irv is also going through reintegration himself, meaning that Irving, Mark and Pete have all had the same process, or at least started it now. With only Dylan to follow suit, it seems that MDR are being targeted. Now, finally, on this point, what will Dylan do with this information, as Milchick did almost blackmail him into removing the family privileges that he got in the last couple episodes ago? But I still think that Dylan will ultimately make the right decision. After all, he is a family man, and MDR to him is kind of like a family. We then get to see Milchick have his first performance review, which I actually really found it an interesting part of the story, and especially how Lumen still carry the concept of formalities around, such as Drummond when he even makes them pre-book their lunch order in case the meeting goes over a certain time frame. And plus the fact that this meeting just brought up some really weird mistakes on his part, like the overuse of large words, or even putting a paperclip on some documents backwards and ultimately confusing the reader. But like it's just crazy to think that the direction of a paperclip would confuse the reader into which way they need to start. It is mental. But it does make me question who's actually reporting this to them. And for me, I do think it's Miss Huang, as she clearly mentioned a couple of scenes ago, the fact that he had had a performance review upcoming and even asked some quite intrusive questions as well. Is this her hidden agenda as she tries to take over the role of Milchick? Or, as Ste mentioned to me, and following on from the previous throwaway theory, because Miss Huang actually, could she be of some importance to Lumen? Maybe not an Egan, but maybe the child of one. Maybe a child of one of those board members, if the board is even human. Could she almost be there as a mole from the board to spy on the Egan mole of Helena? But now that Helena is gone, could she have been told to spy on Milchick instead? Now, regardless, Milchick was fine and lives to see another day.
Praise cure.
But now does have to tighten up a leash a little bit on those severed employees and almost revert back to the basics and prevent future mistakes from happening, like bringing in other departments that failed, wellness retreats that failed, and ultimately just being kind, and again, that failed. We then get Mark flicking through different projects such as Allentown, Astoria, Bellingham, and even then eventually Cold Harbour, which was labelled that if Mark does complete it, it will go down as one of the greatest achievements for Lumen history ever. Which again just highlights the importance of this particular project. And of course, I will be looking a little bit deeper into some of those other project names to see what it could be. So if you guys do know anything, please hit us in the comments and let's have that discussion, because most likely I will be jumping on Reddit a little bit later today to try and dive into some theories around those projects. Either way, as we speculated, Mark's project does seem increasingly more and more important. And I think for us, Gemma is still the reason behind it. Now, although the fact that she's clearly alive, and the fact that Lumen clearly swapped out the bodies at the morgue, now, that line does still make me think that Gemma still might be broken some way in her mind. We then get a quick scene of good old Rickon and how he's working on some of Lumen's propaganda, trying to create that version of his book that is solely designed for the severed employees. We see Irving's outie meet Burt, who then discuss the reasons behind Burt's dismissal, which is all around some kind of erotic entanglement with a work colleague. And as they both make the assumption that it's the two of them, Burt mentions about his husband, Fields. Now, the name Fields is overemphasised quite a lot during that conversation, and I feel that this is going to be John Noble's character, because we know that he's in the series, and actually he's quite well known and diverse actor as well, and in my opinion, because you need someone with that kind of skill to be on screen with Christopher Walken. Now, this seems like a good approach, but then again, it makes me ask the question with these three potentially teaming up in the next episode. Will they talk over the truth? And how will that go down? Potentially, Burt and Fields have some information that will aid Irving in his search to understand what all of this is about and the secrets that are behind Lumin. The fact that John Noble was listed on IMDb to be in 5 episodes, that means that we're going to have to see him now for the rest of the season. But also, there's some other actors as well, like the previous employees from MDR, or even the people from the Goat Sanctuary. They're all in multiple episodes, so we are going to be seeing some of these characters return, which I am looking forward to. But of course, we end the episode with Mark S being reintegrated with his mind as he ends up walking through or stepping out onto the 7th floor whilst Gemma is reading off all the facts about Mark S and what he actually likes to do. But we also noticed throughout the whole episode that Mark has been coughing, which is something that was happening to Pete before he ended up dying. So, are we about to see the downfall of Mark either by the end of this season or the end of season 3? And is he actually going to die before he's able to come face to face with his wife, Gemma? Now, overall, guys, I thought this was a great episode. And like I said, plenty of comedic touches throughout.
I don't give 3 dry fucks about his Audi.
There's a nice bit of intrigue at the end with Mark realising that Gemma is actually alive. And also what she does look like on the Severed World as well. And then, of course, we have that interesting dynamic on how their journey is going to be. And as well as that, we've got the tension between Mark and Helly. Mark just wants to crack on with his life because he's done trusting anyone now and he's kind of given up. Where everyone else has their own agendas. Dylan is kind of really family man and family orientated. Mark, again, is just trying to get his job done. And then Helly still wants answers. But those three now make a really interesting dynamic for the next episode. And let's not forget about Milchick's character. Again, today he questioned Natalie on her thoughts around the paintings that followed. And following that performance review, I still think he could almost switch sides. He's finally seeing Lumin for the real people they are. And I like to think that Miss Cobell fully believes in Lumin. But stuff like Helena last week laughing at Kia's stories and the board almost berating him makes him start to question if Lumin is even a good company, as clearly Helena gave no shits about their supposed history. And one final thing I do want to mention, it looked today as though Mark was speeding through Cold Harbour at an increasing pace. And now, as we speculated, Cold Harbour is about Gemma/Miss Casey. Could the reintegration process have actually helped Mark's ability to complete Cold Harbour? And could we finally see the completion of this project next week? Right, over to you then, guys. Do you think Dylan will tell Mark about the directions or simply follow them himself? Will Mark complete Cold Harbour next week? And do you think Milchick is an overall good guy or an overall bad guy? As always, thanks for watching. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button. As I said, we are close to 3k and would love your support. And as always, we'll catch you next time with something new.
Have you ever heard the story of the Glaxshupen?
It smells like horse shit.